Hello everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Jennifer Glaze, and I am the host of the weekly talk show here on OTV Media Network called Becoming Your Best. I am also the owner and operator of a private practice in Ackworth, Georgia by the same name, Becoming Your Best Counseling Services. So this weekly show that's provided, its basic purpose is to provide more familiarity and more awareness around mental health concepts. We want to get to a point where the conversation about mental health and mental health services is more readily available, easy to talk to. People are more knowledgeable about various subjects, which hopefully in turn will provide a better outcome for our cities, our society in general. I do want to mention, however, that the shows that we are providing are not a substitute for going to see a mental health professional, which actually in that statement there actually brings me right into today's subject. So today we're going to be talking about therapy, just what's it all about. So let's go ahead and get the mental health triangle on the screen, please. Thank you. So in previous episodes, we've taken a look at this and we've basically talked about how this triangle is just our mental health. It is our mental health. It's a mental health concept. Our thoughts impact our emotions impact our thoughts, and they both impact our behaviors. What we think, what we feel impacts what we do. Basic, right? Okay, thank you. So now let's go ahead and take a look at image number one. So when we think about the concept of therapy, it can seem pretty foreign. Like, why? What am I doing? Why am I talking to a stranger? So image one, please. So as that image comes up, you'll see a person with kind of a thought bubble. There you are, and their thoughts and everything is all kind of mixed up. So you see the lady with the blue top is the one who appears to be the client. So she's the one talking, and all her thoughts and feelings are jumbled up. And then the person with the white shirt is presenting as the therapist. So the therapist is receiving what the client is saying, but in the therapist's mind, she's able to kind of decipher and organize the thoughts of the client. What seems so unorganized to the client looks very organized, or she's interpreting it in an organized fashion to the client. So this really, to me, symbolizes the therapy process. I think it's a very good illustration. Okay, thank you for image one. So when people ask me what's therapy all about, I typically say a couple things. But where I usually start is that I just really feel like therapy is when you come to an impartial third party to share your thoughts and feelings. The therapist is going to help you explore what motivates your behavior, maybe what underlying concerns or underlying challenges motivate your behavior, motivate things that you do, maybe examine what thoughts and feelings are driving your behavior. And then if there's something there that needs to be modified, the therapist is going to be the one to help you figure out or kind of lead you to you determining what's the best way to behave differently, respond differently. That's a big key in the therapy process. So let me talk about a couple of things. When you go to a therapist, of course, it should be someone that you don't know, you don't have a personal relationship with. But one positive is that you don't know this person. You don't have any emotional ties to this person. Whatever you say there stays there. We as mental health professionals are bound by something called confidentiality, which basically says just what I said. Whatever you share will not get shared anywhere else unless there's concern of harm to self, harm to others, any type of abusive type situations. Those are the only ways that we can breach confidentiality. Confidentiality is the cornerstone of what we do. So again, what's said there stays right in that office setting, or nowadays with the way the world works, in that virtual room, if you will. It stays there unless there's any type of concern in those other areas. When you speak to, oftentimes people want to speak to family or friends, and they feel that that's really better than speaking with a professional. But here's the thing, when you speak with your friends, we hope for the best, but do we really know that our information is going to be kept confidential? Do we really know that it's not going to be shared intentionally or unintentionally? We don't always know that for sure. When you work with that therapist, you know that. And if it's not kept confidential, you have the right for to pursue other consequences because like I said, we're bound by law to keep things tight and in order and keep things in an orderly fashion. Also, as a therapist, as a trained professional, we're not only talking, we are working a treatment plan. We've developed a treatment plan. That plan is individualized and based on what information is going on, what's being shared, we are creating individualized techniques that we are hoping are most beneficial for that client. When you speak with a friend or a family member or things like that, you're talking and it's you typically don't have interventions being presented. You may have someone sharing their perspective, which is great, but you may not necessarily be getting something to utilize to put forth in your life. So I just also want to differentiate between the two. Also, a lot of times I hear people say, um, I go to my barber or I'll go to my beautician, that's my therapy. I will say this, I think that the release or sharing your thoughts and your concerns, that has a therapeutic benefit. I will give you that. But again, you're not getting interventions, you're not getting techniques, you're not getting things to do to implement in your life very often. What you're getting is that release. And the release is great, but the release without tools to do things differently will tend to keep you in the same situation. So I do want to clarify the differences in those two scenarios, if you will. Let's go ahead and get image 2, please. So here's something that I want to just briefly go over about if you were to talk with a therapist, what to expect. So, number one, let's look at this real quickly. Instead of judging you, a therapist tries to help you understand your behaviors, which honestly, if you're dealing with a loved one, sometimes that is a unintended consequence of talking to someone that you know. You may get more so judgment against what's going on instead of that understanding empathetic ear. You don't need judgment at that time. You're in a vulnerable situation. You just need someone to listen to you. Let's see. So drop down a little bit. Therapists give you ideas about healthy coping skills, which again, those are some of the tools that you'll get when you speak with a therapist, unlike what you may typically get with a loved one. And let's see, let's go to the last one. Therapists motivate you to meet your life goals or create goals. And also, one other thing, therapists can also hold you accountable, but hold you accountable in a healthy way. And again, not in a from a judgmental perspective. Okay, thank you for image 2. So one thing I do want to talk about kind of in depth, let's go ahead and have image number 4, please. So image number 4 talks about your therapist won't give you the answers, but they will help you find them. This is I think a very big misconception about the field of therapy, like somebody's going to tell me what to do. Thank you for image 4. Often, I will also hear people say when we talk about therapy, they will say, therapy didn't work for me. It didn't work. And that always kind of, that statement bothers me. And I'll explain why. Think of therapy almost as like think of like maybe someone in a sport, maybe football. And when you're in football, you're on the sidelines and you get the information from the coach, if you will. The coach gives you instructions, gives you a strategy, but then it's up to you to get out on the field and do the work. Think of therapy similarly. I just mentioned how you get techniques on what to do. You get the techniques in the session, but putting forth the techniques is up to the client. You get maybe 1 hour a week or every other week to get coached on different techniques. You'll talk about what worked, what didn't work, what hindrances maybe you had in implementing the techniques. You'll talk about all those things, but you should leave with a strategy on what to do for the next week to 2 weeks to help create a better scenario, a better situation, what you can do. Then you are equipped, or I shouldn't say equipped, you have the responsibility to go out and implement those techniques to determine if they will create a better scenario. So in saying all this, the majority of the work, honestly, lies with the person. It lies with the client. It doesn't lie with the clinician. The clinician, again, will give techniques based on research, based on your scenario, on what, and based on what you're saying, on what may work, but the client is the one who has to go out on the field, go out in life, and implement those techniques. If you want something different, you have to do something different. If you do the same things, often you're right, things won't change. So when I hear people say just therapy didn't work, to a degree that bothers me. Now, I will agree, therapy may not be for everyone. And therapy may not be for everyone in a traditional setting, like, both sitting down with a professional in an office. I agree that doesn't work for everyone. But I do think from time to time, everyone will benefit from being in some form of therapeutic process. So, but when we want changes in life, we have to remember that we have to get out on the field, put forth the coach's plan, and work to create change. And change is work. Change doesn't happen overnight, but with emphasis and with planning, you can create change in your life. A couple other things. Let's see. Okay, a couple other things I do want to talk about the therapy process. So sometimes we may meet with our therapist. Let's say we're working with someone new. Oftentimes we don't mesh with our therapist, and that's okay. Oftentimes when I hear people, let's say someone's interviewing for a job, and I'll say, well, you should really, just like they're interviewing you, you should interview them to make sure that that job is a good fit for you. It's the same with a therapist. The therapist is bringing their techniques and their perspective, and they're getting a feel for you, but you need to get a feel for them, and you need to make sure that the two of you connect. Are you to be bosom buddies? Absolutely not. But at the same time, you do want someone who you see eye to eye with, you have kind of similar perspectives, you gel, if you will. If you and the clinician just are not meeting or gelling at all, then it's okay to say, I think I'm going to look for a different therapist. That's 100% your right, your benefit, and you should pursue that because that therapeutic process is for you. It's not for the therapist, it's for you, the client. You need to ensure that you're getting the things that you need to get to the places that you need to be. If I go to my primary care physician and we're not gelling, we're not mixing, I don't like that person's bedside manner, I don't like how they speak to me, I'm not going to swear off physical health. Well, I'm just not going to a doctor anymore. I'm going to say I'm not going to that doctor anymore. Same with your mental health. Don't swear off mental health services. Find a provider that works with you. And also, to that same perspective, I want to talk a little bit about people of color and the need for more professionals that look like me. Uh, people of color, women, typically from different perspectives, that when you meet with somebody who is similar, you may feel a bit more comfortable. You may feel like they understand your perspective. And I'm not saying that you have to, if you're a person of color, you have to have a professional of color. I'm not saying that. What I'm really saying is I hope that in the future we have more young people who seek to go into the mental health services, mental health professionals, psychiatrists, therapists, things of that nature, because we need to make those connections. Those connections help people be more open to service. Like they say, representation matters. It matters if you see professionals, doctors who look like you. It does bring down some anxiety and it does put yourself at ease a bit more. Hold on. I see that we have a couple of comments. So let me see. Okay. So Miss Lataya says, agree, people other than therapists tend to give their opinion and advice. Yeah, I think that was regarding the seeing people other than the therapist, and most times making you feel worse. Yes. I do think, I will say this, I do think that many times when people speak with, let's say, loved ones or their beautician or what have you, it's with good intention. But I also think that sometimes they say things or do things that will leave the person feeling worse. And it may lead them to not open up again, where a trained professional will know how to temper a comment. A trained professional will know, is this me talking, me, the person talking, or me, the professional talking? Because that can be two different people. And sometimes if it's me, the person talking, I need to be quiet. I don't need my stuff coming out. But if I'm going to my beautician, they don't quite know how to temper whose voice is this? Is this me, the professional, or me, the person? So things may come out that are not as appropriate as they could be. So again, that's another benefit of going to see a trained professional. Thank you, Ms. Lataya. I appreciate it. Let's see. So let me go ahead and let's look at image number 3. So I think this image is just going to go over things you may need to consider if you are seeking therapy, or signs that you may want to consider therapy. So let's look at number 1. Your friends are tired of listening to you talk about your problems. That's kind of blunt, but sometimes we can drain our friends with our situations, and they really don't know how to address them. So, and then sometimes if you are that friend and you have someone who keeps coming to you with the same stuff over and over again, it's fine to say, you know, so and so, have you ever thought about talking to a professional about this? That does two things. That, number one, it brings up therapy as a possibility, but it also creates an environment where talking about therapy is normalized. You just normalize that conversation, and that can help lead them to a very healthy path. So that really is a wonderful thing to do. Let's look at a couple others. So let's drop down a few kind of in the middle. You have a long-term history of mental health issues. Oftentimes, people are diagnosed with certain conditions. We touched on last week's episode about whether something is clinically significant. And if it is, you will be provided with a diagnosis, let's say depression or anxiety. If you have those diagnoses, it's not going away. Oftentimes, it's going to worsen until it's addressed. The way we address certain diagnoses typically is through talk therapy and or medication. If we're just pretending like these things are going to go away, what we're probably going to end up doing is making the situation worse. So if you've been provided with that diagnosis, don't ignore it. See about it. See a professional. Find a professional that fits with your needs and work to do things differently. Let's see. Let's go down to the next to the last one. You're going through a rough patch. Okay. This is when probably I see most clients when they're going through a tricky situation in life. Oh God, reasons can vary so many different ways, through a traumatic experience to grief to COVID. Marital concerns, stepchildren concerns. So typically that's really when people are going to pursue meeting with someone. They need someone to come to talk some things through. And that's fine. That's a great way to start. But really, you can start therapy at any time. And really, therapy can be something that you just do kind of as a maintenance, to just have that, again, impartial third party to work challenges through with. There's nothing wrong with it. But that rough patch, when you find yourself in a rough patch and you just can't really figure out which way to go or what's the best decision, that therapist can help you think some things through. Go back to, can I get the first image again, please? When you're having that rough patch, that person can help you just kind of tease out the things that are going on. There you go. Thank you. Help you maybe organize, and then maybe help you together determine what's a strategy we can implement to try to come up with a different perspective. Let's see. Miss Lataya says, can you address the difference between a support group versus therapy? Sure. Support groups don't necessarily have to be led by a trained therapist. For one thing, a lot of times support groups are people with similar lived experiences, and you may have someone serving as a leader, maybe someone who's had more time, but it's kind of like the group kind of works together within one another. But you can have group therapy. You can have group therapy. You can have individual therapy. You can have family therapy, which that is going to be led by a trained therapist that's also going to have those therapeutic techniques implemented and specific skills implemented to provide take that, let's say, group or individual or family through that therapeutic process. So that is a very much more structured, if you will, process than a typical support group. I will say this, you can get support and guidance and training and benefit from both scenarios. But I will say that I think that your best overall outcome is probably going to come from more of a therapy perspective. Oftentimes, though, I will say this, people need to start with a support group just to feel more comfortable going through that process. So going to let's say an AA, because basically AA is a support group. It's a very focused support group, but it's basically a support group. Or there are support groups for all types of things. All types of even disorders, anxiety or depression, but you're probably more than likely you're going to have a leader who is someone who maybe lived with the condition for 10, 15 years, has a lot of knowledge and experience and can take you through that process, but they aren't necessarily a trained licensed provider. So you're going to get some benefit, and it may even help you get ready to be in therapy, particularly if therapy is just a very uncomfortable um, option for you. So they both have weight. I'm not going to downplay either one. I think they each have value, but of course, I think as a as a therapist, I think that the therapy is going to create a better outcome for you. So that is pretty much all that I have for today's session. I want to thank everybody for joining me. Again, I can be reached on my social media pages. They all are basically under the name Becoming Your Best. That's for Facebook. That's for, let me get this comment 1 second. Support groups let you know you are not alone. I agree. One doesn't replace the other. Yes, yes, I agree. Yes. All right, more and more people are becoming life coaches also. The coach indicates they are certified. What's the difference between that and a therapist? Okay. Y'all are working me today. Oh my goodness. Okay, so to my understanding, let me talk about a therapist. Let me talk about the training. I think a big part of the difference between a coach and a therapist is around training. And I believe from my perspective, it's also around your focus in services. So, as a therapist, thank you, Donna. As a therapist, we are college educated, bachelor's degree, master's degree, at least. We also go through the process of what we call internship, where we work under somebody's tutelage, if you will. And then we go through certain state board licensing exams. So when you look at my name and it has the letters LCSW, that indicates basically a master's degree, so many hours under the tutelage of somebody else, and the passing of at least 2 board certified tests. As far as a coach, and maybe I can have a coach on a future show, I don't necessarily know if there's an education requirement like bachelor's or master's. I do think there is a certification process that you have to go through. I don't know how it's regulated, like if each state regulates to have this title, you have to go through this. So I'm not familiar with that, but I know for each state in the US has its own governing body, if you will, that tracks what you do, and if you've successfully completed. Now, to my understanding, also, coaching, I believe, takes you from present day and works to move you forward. Therapy, oftentimes, it will look at present day. It will look to move you forward, but it's with the understanding that really to understand today, we typically have to go back. We have to go back to childhood. We have to go back to adolescence, because who you are today is a result of who you were back then and the influences of your life back then, what brought you to today. So to understand today, we got to take a peek back. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean, from day one in therapy, we're going back to all your worst memories in life. Absolutely not. The therapist is going to know, and based on how you react, they're going to temper when to touch on what topic. We're not forcing anything. It's a process. It's a cooperative relationship. It's a partnership. But the therapy process is going to take more of a look back, where I believe coaches don't really look back. They look forward. If they find, I believe, that there is a need to look back, they will often refer to a therapist. I've received a couple of clients who have told me my life coach suggested that I find a therapist to work with. Let's see. Okay, I got some great jobs. Thank you, and I appreciate it. Let me go back to support groups. Yeah, support groups, I agree. They do let you know that you're not alone in the process. And sometimes I agree that it's a great starting point. It's a great starting point. But I don't know that they always give you everything that you need. I don't believe that they do. But again, to increase that familiarity, which again is like this whole point of this show, to increase familiarity, it's a great starting point. So again, in conclusion, let me just go ahead and go over my social media presence. They're all under the same name of Becoming Your Best. That's going to be on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you. The Twitter is the only one that's a little different. The your is you are instead of the traditional spelling. So go ahead, and if you enjoy the show, please like the recording, please share, please invite friends and family to join us, and I will see you guys next week. Take care.